So in continuation with yesterday's very fruitful panel discussions, we move over to the first session for day 2. And we know that despite a strong public and private healthcare ecosystem, we lag behind in translation research and generation of meaningful data. So this particular session, this forms the crux of the next panel discussion. And I think it is very apt that we have Dr. Moni Abraham Kuriakose to moderate this session. Sir is one of the handful of clinician scientists we have in this country at this moment. And he's currently serving as the medical director of Karkinos, Kerala. He's also a visiting professor at Roswell Park University, New York. And his basic fields of interest include head and neck oncology, skull-based surgery, and also he's also into a lot of basic research as far as head and neck stem cell, the etiology is concerned. So, and innumerable publications, and also he's got multiple patents to his name. I think it would be a very fruitful session under the moderation of Dr. Moni. I invite Sir over to the stage to take over the stage. Dr. Lakshmi Haridas, Professor at RCC Trivandrum, will be introducing the panelists for you.
Good morning, esteemed audience. We welcome all the panelists to this wonderful topic discussion for research, what is lacking in Kerala. Professor Chandrabas is the director of RGCB. He earned his PhD from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, an accomplished scientist with special interest in Raman and Brilliant spectroscopy with research in X-ray diffraction using synchrotron radiation. Welcome you, sir. Dr. Vidya Veldur is a vice president of clinical operations at 4Base Care, which is a homegrown genomics company that has advanced precision oncology in Asia. She has extensive experience in clinical operations, cancer genomics, and the life sciences, including molecular biology, and her contribution to precision oncology aims at improving patient outcomes. Welcome, ma'am. Dr. Shaji Kumar is a clinician scientist at Mayo Clinic, focused in new drug development in hematologic disorders. Sir needs no extra discussions for his career. We already know him, pioneer in multiple myeloma and plasma cell disorders, author of innumerable original articles, and true academician cum scientist. Welcome you, sir. Dr. Sabi George is a medical oncologist with keen interest in uro-oncology, director of network clinical trials at Roswell Park Comprehensive Cancer Center, and a part and parcel of several registration trials in uro-oncology, which we day-to-day refer. Welcome, sir. Dr. Aju Matthew needs no introduction to us. He is a practicing medical oncologist in Ernakulam, and his special interests are in epidemiology and implementation scientist. Over to Moni, sir.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me. Hello. Good morning. And before we start the session, let me first congratulate Dr. Boban and Dr. Aju for creating a different type of conference we all really enjoyed. Bringing people from different domains to come together to discuss some of the important issues. And this panel discussion is also not going to be different. As you have heard, we have people from different domains discussing about research. As a moderator, my responsibility is to introduce the concept and some of the pain points which the panelists can discuss. So to start with clinical. So if I'll introduce that, then these panelists will discuss the topic, and then we'll open up for discussion. Now, clinical research, when you talk about clinical research, lies at the intersection of basic science, clinical practice, and ethics. So in this panel, we had some discussion prior to this panel discussion online. So we're going to discuss clinical research in the lens of oncologists, as well as patient. As oncologists, we depend on data a lot for day-to-day clinical practice. But the point we need to ponder, where is the data comes from, whether it's relevant to the population we serve. We all know that cancer, when it develops, whether it's in Kerala or Kathmandu or Kentucky, cancer is cancer. There is no difference. But susceptibility to cancer, or a response to the treatment, or even implementation of the cancer access as well as affordability of cancer is different. So that data needs to be generated within the population we serve. So it's no longer a luxury, but a necessity. Now, when we talk about Kerala, we are in a very, very interesting type of population. We heard from yesterday's discussion. Now, Kerala is almost 10 years ahead of what is happening in the rest of the country because of the epidemiological transition. We heard yesterday that our incidence is about 200 per 100,000. Rest of the country is about half of that. And our number is almost half of what is happening in North America, where they come for almost 400 per 100,000. So we have a unique opportunity to bring up some data which is very, very interesting and relevant for discussion. Now, with the increase in cancer incidence, we also have increase in cancer care delivery network too. For a population of 34 million, with a crude number of about 80,000 new cancer patients, we have about 30 cancer centers, and that number is increasing. When it comes to cancer research also, if you go to RGCB's new campus or Karkinos lab or wherever you go, we have amazing infrastructure too. When it comes to the oncologists also, number is also increasing. Now the question is, if you look at the research which has come out in Kerala, a lot of research has happened. Most of the research, if you look at it, mostly epidemiological research, or look at early detection, or some of the pain and palliation research. And most of the research has come from public or regional cancer centers or some of the NGOs. Now we need to ask the question whether it has come from the larger oncology population or not. And what is the gap, what is the missing gap that is going to be discussed here. Now, one of the primary gap, if you look at it, is in the clinical trial. The number of clinical trials or transforming clinical trials coming out from the country, or specifically from India, is awfully lacking. We need to ask the question, why, what is the case behind that? So overall, if you look at, we have number of patients, we have infrastructure, and as well as personnel to manage it, but there are some definite gaps are there. So just to point out some of the important gaps, if you listed it out, maybe regulatory type of issues. Those who have approached CEDESCO and looking at DCGI, we know the challenges faced by the investigator initial trial. Now the second point is funding. If you look at the funding is the oxygen for clinical research. And if you look at the funding, most of the funding goes to basic science or even translation research. Hardly any funding comes from the clinical trials. So that is something which we need to look at that. Yesterday's discussion, there was a panel discussion. We heard that in the culture of generics, the innovative type of research or high-risk research is not really rewarded. I'll give you an example. Now, about 4 or 6 years ago, I reviewed a proposal from a very good clinical research group on an induction immunotherapy in head and neck cancer. And that never got funded because reviewers thought that will increase the cost of the treatment. Now, we read 2-3 weeks ago about the Keynote 689 trial design, almost similar type of trial design. So that shows that we are not a high-risk taking type of facilities what we have. Now, the other issue we have is that the patient's concept about the acceptance for clinical trial, that is also a major challenge. There's a lot of taboo attached with that. That also we can discuss. When it comes to manpower, there are a lot of medical oncologists are there and also clinical oncologists are there in Kerala. The number is steadily increasing, and a large number of patients, almost 60% of cancer patients, are managed in the private sector. But we need to ask the question whether the private sector oncologists are being part of that clinical trial or clinical research, and what could be the gap of that. That attitude also, we need to look at that. To address all these points, we have the amazing panelists, and they're going to discuss some of the issues in detail. So to start with, we're going to request Professor Chandrabas to talk about the translation research. What are the issues we are facing? Chandrabas, over to you.
First of all, I should thank Dr. Moni for really thinking through this whole panel, and it's wonderful that he has put across each one's assignment, and I actually come from a research background. So I'm going to talk to you about translational research opportunities and challenges. This is something which is very, very important to understand. First and foremost, we need to understand what is translational research. We actually get into a muddle when we actually try to talk about translational research. When we are going through a drug or a procedure or a process, we need to do preclinical trials, then animal studies, then human studies. Then it gets into the translation to patients and then to the population. This is what is the whole cycle of what we are talking about. But what is translational research? It is in between fundamental research and clinical research. It needs to bridge these two. These are two poles apart. If you think about fundamental research and clinical research, there is a big gap, and that is what the translation research has to bridge. And when we are talking about translation research, one of the most important things which is missing is the leadership. And the leadership is very, very important. It's not an academic leadership. It is a leadership which is transformative, which means the leadership should be able to understand various aspects of clinical to fundamental research to what it takes to get the interdisciplinary areas of research which is there in the translation. This is to be very, very important to actually look at, and this leadership is lacking in this country. Management of projects and people is very, very important when you are looking at translation research, because the time frame is fixed. We can't have a long-term goals for this. So we need to have a very good management of the projects. And there should be a very good communication between the various stakeholders inside this interdisciplinary area of research. When we go further, there is a lot of problems which come up when we are actually dealing with multidisciplinary areas. There has to be a regular, when we are treating diverse teams, there are problems of conflict, there are problems of having to do with stress management. All of these things require a dynamic environment which needs to be built up, followed by a collaborative and very good networking which needs to bring together multiple stakeholders at every platform to build up a strong team. Finally, we need to have defined roles and responsibility for various people, and each of these roles have to be monitored and well executed. If you can succeed in having this kind of an environment around, then India can do translational research. Otherwise, we will be doing basics research and we will be doing clinical research. Both of these will not be able to join together. And that's the biggest thing which I would like to, today we have a problem. Why do I say translational research is very important? Because there is a huge valley of death. Whatever is done in the basic research, 90% of it will fail. The reason is we do not have a good model for actually simulating what would happen in a human. The best systems to study animal models is dog. And we are not allowed to do anything, any research on dog. This is not allowed. And this is why we need to have alternative methods. Of course, I'm also supporting the idea of not using animals, very importantly. But there is nothing very close to human which we can actually test out in the lab. And that's where the failure is big. And another problem which happens in these areas is the attrition. Attrition rate is too high in sustaining a good talent in this pool. These two things are going to work against us. Now, what is the major problem if you want to have a very good ecosystem for developing such a translation research? We do academics. Academics, I always say, PhD students cannot be the people to do translation. They need to actually publish papers, they need to actually get. And evaluation of academicians is done on the number of publications which is done. If you are going to have these two criteria, you can never do translational research. It will only be a make-believe situation. So the academicians need to actually interact with clinicians to know what the problems are, and clinicians needs to know what it takes to do academic research in this. Now, there is a need for bridging this between industry. Industry needs to come, and I have heard industry saying, we do not trust an academic institution in this country. And this is from the horse's mouth, I have heard. Industry never comes to the academic because they do not trust the kind of work which is being done in academia. So these are the issues which are existing, and as Dr. Moni had mentioned about funding. So until unless we bridge all these four together, we are not going to have translational research in this country. But this is not bad. There is a need to think about it, and we need to bring out things. Many people have tried in clinics. Clinicians have tried to do translation research, academicians have tried to do translation research, but this has failed because there is no right ecosystem. So what it takes to actually take the translational research forward? We need to have a very improved quality of hypothesis. Most of the hypothesis is based on a limited knowledge. And that limited knowledge is not good enough for us to actually make the right hypothesis. And we need to actually develop it, and that means we need to have a huge number of contributors to this hypothesis. We need to actually develop organized systems, 3D organized systems now. It is possible to take the patient sample cells and try to develop an organoid, and using that organoid, we can actually develop model systems for studying what it takes to develop newer products. Deep phenotyping of the patients is very, very important today, as it was pointed out by Dr. Moni. It is different, people are different. The treatment has to be personalized. Precision medicine is on the way, and that needs to be addressing this issue. Drug repurposing is very, very important because many of the drugs fail because they are toxic or various other problems are there in getting clearances. So can we actually try to do drug repurposing? Increasing transparency. This is very important because your data should be available to anybody to scrutinize it. We need to publish the data all over the place so that people can work on the data and tell whether what you did is correct or not. This is exactly what is necessary if we want to go for it. Adopting open innovation and intellectual property is very important. More effective funding mechanism has to be developed. More effective decision-making processes have to be developed. And a teamwork and inter-organizational cooperation. This is very, very important. And in India, we need to actually develop this. This is not existing. There is a lot of underlying problems to bring 2 or 3 different institutions to come together to work together. So this is the situation we are existing, and I propose that how do we do a translation research, and this is my final slide. I am actually saying that you have to have the whole ecosystem to be in one place. That means the clinical, the industry and the academia should be in the same place. So we need to actually select a place which has a very robust academic environment with sophisticated instrumentations and everything available, the quality of academicians available. Now we need to actually develop the translational research aspect of it, where we actually need to have a referral hospital. What I mean by referral hospital is, the hospital doesn't compete with all the other hospitals present in the ecosystem. It is a hospital which actually looks at the first line of treatment failure patients. And these are actually supposed to be referred by the hospitals. And they come here, and then you do all the necessary things what I mentioned before in this academic environment. Industries come here, we actually incubate them, we give them the CROs, we give them the CGMP facilities in that same ecosystem. And you also provide an incubation facility for these industries to come here. And once you have such an ecosystem, you actually take the intellectual property of the things. Now, one of the things where the failure happens on a referral hospital is that we actually, if you have listened to the inaugural lecture of Pramesh, he had mentioned that there is a gap between the nurse and the highly accomplished MD. We need to have an intermediary, people who will take care of the patients, regular patients. Right now, the OP is even done by the MD, who is a super specialty person. We don't want that. We want to have an intermediary. What is lacking in clinicians? One of the problems in Indian clinicians is they lack the basic knowledge of cell biology, microbiology, and biochemistry. These are taught in the first year of MBBS, and after that they forget it. And this is, without this, they cannot actually understand what it takes to do research. And that is why I propose in this academic environment an MS degree, MS by research, a degree for all the MBBS, so that when they do the MD, they already have this actually set up. And this is what I propose, and that if it is followed, I think the translation research in this country would be happening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the valuable comments and challenges, as well as your plan for to solve the problem. Next, may I request Dr. Sabi George to comment on how to integrate, how to actually do clinical trial in a very busy clinician's life. Sabi, this is a challenge we always face in our practice.
Thank you. Thank you, AMPOC, for having me, and Dr. Mani for moderating this session. So in the next few minutes, I'd like to talk about the various elements required for clinical trial conduct at your center, and also why it is important. So these are my disclosures. So let me start by telling the story of this patient, Jean. This is name and dates are not real for privacy purposes. Jean was 89 years old in February of 2013 when she failed a standard treatment for advanced kidney cancer. She failed sunitinib and another TKI, and the options that I had for her was everolimus or a clinical trial. So her goal was to live till June of that year, when her grandson got married in Virginia. So she asked me, "Doc, how can I make this happen?" I said, well, I have a clinical trial also. So this trial is testing a new drug called BMS 936-558. It didn't have a name, and versus everolimus. So you have a 50-50 chance to get the new drug. And either way, I hope that you will meet your goal. So she goes on the trial, and sure enough, she gets the BMS 936-558. She gets randomized to that. And you could see on the left-hand side, the expansilytic lesion of the scapula, which healed over time. In 2016, when she came off the trial for toxicity, immune-mediated toxicity, she had a complete response. And so since then, she had been off therapy. And I saw her in September of last year, and I will be seeing her September of this year. She turned 100, and she's been disease-free and treatment-free for the past 9 years. So that is a profound story, and I do have a lot of those patients. So what did that result in? I had 27 patients on this trial. I enrolled 27 patients on this trial, and I got my name on this paper, which later becomes one of the most important papers in kidney cancer, and this led to the first immune checkpoint inhibitor approval in kidney cancer, nivolumab. So, what are the elements required to conduct a clinical research at your center? So at our center, we do clinical care, clinician scientists do clinical care, research-based practice, and teaching. So every institution has to protect the time, give them protected time to, allow for the physicians to do research. So at my center, say for example, I see patients 2 days a week. The rest is for research, teaching, and travel to meetings and all that. So it varies from place to place, and if everybody's seeing patients 5 or 6 days a week, then it's not possible to do clinical research. And these are the various steps involved in conducting clinical research, being a good clinician, et cetera, et cetera. I won't be going over all of these, but I'm going to highlight a couple of those in the next few slides because of lack of time, and we'll be discussing more, I guess. And it's important to be able to do clinical research. Say, for example, if you want to do a research in clinical trial in lung cancer, you need to see a lot of lung cancer patients. You need to have the volume to be able to accrue to those trials. And that's how you develop expertise. You see hundreds of lung cancer every day or every week, and you know the ins and outs of all that. And so volume is important, and being able to see the things under the microscope. If you see only lung cancer, you see a lot of those, and that's how you develop your expertise and be able to accrue to clinical trials. And so these are some of the steps involved in doing a trial, and you can think and see if all these are available, possible at your center. So from protocol development to approval by the disease-specific research group or clinical disease team, and then prioritization committee, scientific review committee, and institutional review board, IRB approval of a trial, then contracting and budgeting. You need to have people for all these elements. And then investigator meeting, site initiation visit, and activation of a trial. After the activation, you start the trial enrolling patients. The most important thing is, giving the consent to the patient. Informed consent is a tedious and lengthy process. We have to talk about the options available on a standard of care basis, as well as the research options. And so you have to give the alternatives to clinical trials as well before, enrolling a patient in a trial. And they should not be forced to go on a trial. They should not be enticed to go on a trial. They should go voluntarily. And that's the important aspect. And as a physician, you should be highly ethical in doing this. You should not have a lot of conflict of interest. You should not be promoting the company's drug on one end and then try to put patients on clinical trials by the same company. So these are regulated by the ethics committee and all that. And then study assessments, reporting of AEs and completion, closeout, publication, etc. So those are the elements basically required to conduct a clinical trial and report it. And so it's also important that you have enough clinical research coordinators, regulatory support for submitting the updated AEs and SUSARs, and also investigator brochures, newer version of consents, and being able to consent the patient over and over again with the newer versions. Those are all important aspects, and will take a lot of time and effort and money. And then data collection and data entry in a timely fashion, because those are important when the trial is going to be analyzed. If data are not available from different centers, the trial cannot be completed. So those are the things, and then you report at various meetings and publish in high-impact journals, etc. Now, these are different kinds of trials: investigator-initiated trials, cooperative group trials, and pharma trials. So those are, I won't detail those, but importantly, when it comes to manuscript submission, it is your role. You are selected on a paper based on your contribution. If you haven't contributed enough, you may not be on the paper. So I was blessed enough to have contributed a lot to a lot of those trials, and that's why I have a presence in that field. Now, to summarize again, the important elements of a clinical trial at your center, institutional review board. It is important for making sure that the subject's well-being is upheld, and there is enough oversight of the ethics of the investigators and all the people involved. And making sure that everybody involved has adequate research training, including city training, which is the basic training that we require for being able to do research. And then scientific review committees, disease-specific groups, clinical research services. That is a department, a big department with support for budget, regulatory support, coordinator support, data, contracting, etc. And it's also important to have well-trained investigators, as Dr. Chandrabas mentioned. And then these studies are audited and monitored on a regular basis to make sure that they're following the ethical guidelines and making sure that they're upholding the safety of the patients. And DSMB are required for monitoring the studies and biostatistical support and writing support for publishing. So that's basically all I have to say. Sorry, I have a lot more to say, but for lack of time, I'll cut short. And thank you. We'll have the panel questions.
Thank you, Sabi. Thank you for outlining the components of clinical trial. Next, we have Dr. Shaji Kumar. He's going to outline about another aspect of clinical research, that is the real-world evidence. Over to you, Dr. Shaji.
See if I can get the slides up. Right. So good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Moni and Aju and Bobin, for the opportunity to be here this morning. So what I'm going to do is to start from where Sabi left off, which is the whole concept of different types of trials, right? So we talked about, see if this thing moves. So these are my disclosures. So when you think about the clinical trial spectrum, right? So we just heard about the interventional trials. I mean, this is something, as Dr. Chandrabas already told you, is hard to do, especially with the resources that we have available around the globe. Clearly, it is the gold standard, and we do interventional clinical trials with two main purposes. One is, can you get a new therapy approved for use in the clinic? And two, maybe not as commonly and definitely less funded, is to ask fundamental clinical questions. How do you manage this patient in front of you? And so those are two very different types of clinical trials, and certainly these are very well designed, a targeted patient population, a very prescribed intervention, expensive to do, but unfortunately the data is not always generalizable to a population that you actually treat. The second set of trials that you can do, which is much less expensive than interventional trials, are pragmatic trials. So these are things that you do day in, day out in your clinic. These are the patients you take care of based on the learnings that you have had so far, maybe synthesized in a much more efficient fashion using AI-based approach, like Dr. Srikanth just talked about earlier this morning. But at the same time, these are very practice-informing trials. The pragmatic trials may not necessarily get you the next drug approved, but it will definitely tell you how to take care of the patient who shows up with a specific problem. Certainly, these are less objective. And then finally, we have real-world studies, which are essentially using data that exist and not even just prospectively looking at how your interventions or what you do in the clinic is affecting the patient, but rather looking at a past experience of what has happened in the past and what can be learned from it. It's certainly the least expensive of all these different types of trials we can talk about. But again, they have very distinct purposes. One is obviously practice informing. Second is hypothesis generating and use the interventional trials to actually prove that your hypothesis is actually correct. And this can be done fast because these are based on existing data. And this is increasingly being utilized as the electronic health record system is becoming more sophisticated and more all-encompassing and has all the data aggregated in one site. So again, it goes along that spectrum of being objective to more subjective, but they have very clear role to play. So first, let's talk about pragmatic trials, right? So pragmatic trial is really a real-world study, but it's usually looking at the common approaches that we use for treating patients. So a good example is, let's say there is equipoise in the field and there's 3 different approaches that we use for treating a condition. and it's impossible to do a randomized trial, especially as was told about surgical trials, where the equipoise may not be quite, even being there may not be accepted. So can we just do a pragmatic trial? You look at the people who are doing intervention 1, 2, and 3, and see if there are differences in a way that doesn't intrude into your normal practice, but at the same time you're collecting the data real time. And there's a lot of science that goes into the pragmatic trials, and I won't go into all the specificities of the pragmatic trial designs, but again, it's a continuum in terms of that interventional trial to pragmatic trials, and variety of different factors play into the determination how much in that, where in the spectrum you land. So it depends on, again, what is the question being asked, what exact role do the investigators do, what kind of interventions are you prescribing, or are you just watching the interventions that are commonly being used, what kind of follow-up is going to be instituted. And on the other side, you have the real-world data and the real-world evidence, right? So we have real-world data that is basically data that is accumulating on a day, minute-by-minute basis in the patient electronic health records with no extra effort on our part. It is there. The question is, how can we use this to develop or generate evidence that in turn can be used for patients, whether it be changing practice or getting drugs approved. So one of the key things is, again, data source, right? When you're thinking about real-world data, there is a plethora of data sources out there. The most easily accessible one are the electronic health records. So Dr. Moni talked about the 30 different cancer centers in this state taking care of 80,000 new patients with new cancer diagnosis. And that's valuable, that's a treasure trove. The problem is we all have fragmented care, and we don't necessarily communicate in a way that allows us to get this data together. So if you were to, again, not advocating for any uniform healthcare platform, but if all these centers were to put the data together that you're collecting on a day-to-day basis, and increasingly we are all using electronic health records, that, I think, creating registries or just integrating electronic health records gives you very valuable data and can answer a lot of very, very important questions. Medical claim data is not that easily accessible in this country, but in the US it forms a very important aspect of large data. And registries are something that I would, again, strongly encourage people to start thinking about and creating them within the context of, again, organizations like AMPO. And of course, there's patient-generated data that patients can also, especially in today's world, everybody has an iPhone or a smartphone in their hand. You can actually collect data directly from the patients using a variety of different apps on a real-time basis, and these can also be an excellent data source. So again, multiple different types of data, not just sources, right? So we have the demographic data, you have the medical intervention data, medical outcomes, genomics increasingly, so we will hear about precision medicine, radiation, radiology data, and so forth. And so again, real-world data designs, we talked about pragmatic trial, we can design prospective observational study when you think an intervention may not necessarily be the right approach for a given situation. And one of the areas that is increasingly getting traction within the regulatory world is the whole concept of real-world controls. We know that it's not always easy for us to randomize patients to two different interventions which may not necessarily be acceptable. So we have an opportunity to create 5% of patients in the US go on interventional cancer trials. What can we learn from the other 95% of the patients that can actually help us make those 5% of patients' data much more valuable? So I think a lot more about these externally controlled clinical trials are being developed. And the fact that there are multiple guidelines from both European and American regulators providing guidance as to what are the essential critical elements of that real-world data that you need to generate for it to be actually used for approval of drugs. And some of these are very basic, good quality data principles that we can implement, not just in the context of clinical trials, but also in terms of studies that change our management of the patients. So again, I think even though a lot of the emphasis on the real-world data is currently on regulatory purposes, primarily because that's where the funding is. But we can also use this data to actually teach us on a day-to-day basis about how to treat our patients. And that can be done at a very low cost if we all are able to put our heads together to do that. So I'll stop there and thank you for attention.
Thank you, Dr. Shaji. Thank you. Next, we have a success story from India, Indian startup ecosystem. May I request Dr. Vidya Veldor to talk about the 4D, 4-base case study.
Good morning, everyone, and I thank Dr. Moni sir, Dr. Raju Matthew, and the entire organizing committee for giving us this opportunity to share here. So, yes, it is a startup story, but then it did come with a lot of, hardship in between. We did have lots of ups and downs. So, I represent 4-Base Care Precision Health Genomics Laboratory, and this is a young company back in the year 2018. The interest was to, do some precision oncology and genomics and help cancer patients, providing genomic solutions. And it was co-founded by 2 young entrepreneurs. Both of them were masters in biotechnology, and Mr. Hitesh and Kshitij. It was around that time we were lucky. Illumina announced a genomics grant for startups, where our lab was the first Asia-specific lab to be selected by Illumina for the accelerator grant. And we came up with the idea to do a successful industry-academia collaboration. And that was a very, very blessing point, I think, for us, that today if we are able to cross 17,000 genomics panels being sequenced in our lab, it's a lot of effort that has come from both academia and the industry. So, and the concept is, whenever we do research, particularly in clinical setting, we have to ask a question which is more meaningful to the doctor, because the reason for doing translational research is we need to find out what is their challenge. As scientists, can we address their challenge? So bedside to bench and then back to bedside. So what we did was, let us understand all the pathogenic alterations that are known in this part of the world across cancers. And we start sequencing more and more of these genes, then we know who are recurring more. What is the percentage of recurrence? If today we know EGFR is known at 40% in Indian population, it is because we sequenced more. If we know some other gene XY, it is more, then the need is created. And if the gene is targetable, then the drug is being questioned for. So that is how I think research can help in clinics today. So moving forward, this is the kind of what I want to say is the thought process or the hypothesis around building research around the industry atmosphere. So we started with some less than 10 people back in 2018. We are 200 plus today. And we have very eminent advisors from the scientific and as well as industry domain. We have the CEO of Illumina, Francis D'Souza, whose mind and is the brain behind high throughput sequencing, and today we are able to get cost-effective genomics. It is because of his brainchild. And we also have in this audience today the genome man of India, Mr. Sam Santosh sir. He was the first person who pioneered genomics in India. So, it's a great thing to share our experience here. And this is how we grew from 2021 when we started providing services to the cancer patients. Now I go back in story in terms of what we did in research. So we closely looked at the TCGA data in 2020 and today. We see that the contribution that has come from the Asian population is very, very minimal in 2020. Or this is the Caucasian data, slightly increased, but predominantly the Asian data has not improved. India contributes 18% of global cancer burden, and Asia contributes 55%, which was discussed earlier. So there is a need for knowing what is there in terms of what types of genes. Genes might be the same because cancer does not change much across geographies, but its response rate and the prevalence of different mutations would change. And I think that's where we need to act upon to help the patients in this part of the world. So this is our first initiative to build a comprehensive panel across all the physicians to help all the oncology community. So we collaborated with Tata Memorial Hospital, Dr. Kumar Prabhash and his group, AIMS, New Delhi, and then Sri Shankara, then Unipoya University, the Yellow Ribbon part of Healthcare Global Group, and of course the entire research was funded by the Illumina. We included 1,500 cancer patients on whole exome sequencing with 32 different cancer types and 435 plus different tumor histologies. We pulled out all the information that has relevance in the tumor biology, onset, driving the disease, and prognostication. And around this, we built a panel, and we call this as the first population-specific cancer gene panel that has been in use last 4 years, and it has given excellent results to many doctors in helping better treatment planning. So before we start, as any other lab, we had a challenge. We went to meet clinicians. They said, you are a startup lab. How can I trust your genetic testing? Dr. Bhavna ma'am is one among them who inspired me. Of course, she said, why should I trust you? You are a good scientist. I know you did well in previous assignments. This is a new lab. This is a new setting. You prove yourself in your lab that you are doing good work, and that's when a clinician can endorse you and say, yes, this lab's results are good and we can take it forward. So our first publication was to publish the extensive validation on 200 plus patient samples for DNA and RNA whole exome in Frontiers in Oncology as per the ISO 15189 and CAP recommendation. And following that, around that time, I must say there were no publications around to support clinical application of whole exome sequencing. And next we went on to say, can we pass on this technology, train more scientists and laboratory technicians to provide affordable solutions in rural areas? Along with the Baba Atomic Research Center, BRC Hospital in Muzaffarpur, we established in 2022, and today the lab is up and running independently, providing genetic testing solution, and this is our first collaborative publication. And then it was also helpful in discovery research of red fusions in medullary cancer. And then there is a new story here. It was also told multiple times, just adding on here. TMB, which was earlier put up as the threshold 10, there were studies showing that not all patients from different ethnicities would respond well. We developed an algorithm and we tried to correlate with the Caucasian data, and we found that in Indian cancer, or rather in the Asian population, the TMB thresholds are not the same for all cancers as evidenced in the Caucasian data. And then, of course, when you do translational research, you end up getting novel drug targets, and you can ask many clinical trials. Like, for example, we know 10 different partners for red fusion. We would have identified 3-4 more partners. How do you prove as a scientist to the clinician that, yes, this is also a activating red fusion? If your kinase domain is intact, then you go back and tell your doctor that although the partner is new, the fusion is intact, so it is the driver probably which is driving the disease. So these are the kind of inferences you can draw when you use a broad panel to help doctors. And then last but not the least, what I want to say here is we want to bridge the gap that is there between what is available in the Western world to what is available in India. So we developed a database, and we call this as the Global Cancer Diversity Atlas, which we launched last month. And honored to have Dr. Narayan Murthy, Professor Dr. Narayan Murthy with us, who inaugurated this. And this is the data that has the structured information on the genomics with some amount of clinical data. And this is our team. Thank you for your
Thank you,
kind
Dr. Vidya.
attention.
Thank you. To wrap up the session, I request Dr. Aju Matthew to talk about his vision about.
Yes. Hello. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I'll just make a simple statement here. I think from a clinician's perspective, practicing in Kerala, there is enough manpower. Our medical oncology professionals are highly talented and skillful. They ask the right question in clinic. They ask the right question for the patient. So manpower is tremendous. The numbers of medical oncologists graduating every year are rising exponentially to a scary level, you know, to the extent that we may think about a Cuban model where some of us may still be jobless. So we have manpower, and I believe we have the funds too. The government is spending money. There are funds available. Research training is available. Tata hosts a Credo workshop, and very few Kerala oncologists apply. And even if they apply, they don't get in because they are not mentored well in the research. So manpower is there, fund is there, research training is there. So what doesn't exist? And that is lack of willpower. Now I'll be true to myself, I just don't have a will to do research here. So lack of willpower is one factor, and lack of incentive. There is no incentive for me to do research in Kerala. So these are two big factors that I see that are detrimental to the progress of clinical trial or collaborative research, for instance. I'll give you an example, practical example. I have attempted to do some collaborative genomic-based research, some collaborative data gathering research, some preliminary rudimentary work, but there is no incentive for anybody to collaborate and give data. Even if you offer authorship, the question is, what do I gain from being an author? So unless there is an incentive and a will, our community will still be copiers and watchers of what is happening across. And this is where I want to may I ask a question to Dr. Vidya? You had research collaborations with these multiple institutions. Why didn't you approach one of us?
So I think it was more of a networking that it came in as a blessing, I would say. Kumar sir has always been very, open to have collaborations, and it just happened that we could meet with Kumar sir, and he connected us with his friends in the board. And of course, we did approach many hospitals. So the good thing that happened here is, unlike in any other collaboration, here every clinician had their own scientific question to ask. And in this kind of a research agreement, we did not want to get into their, so there is freedom and breathing space which we need to give in every collaboration. In the sense that you might have a very important scientific question for a cohort of 200 patients. So that question remains yours and you drive but here is a resource. We got some funding. Okay, let us use it for the benefit of both of us. We have some interesting questions that we want to ask. You also have some interesting questions which you also want to ask. We need not always collaborate with each other and get the same answers. You can have an independent answer. As long as both of us are able to use this information successfully and get something out for the mankind, that should be good enough. And I think the crux was we had enough. Somebody was there to fund us in the beginning. That was one. And even now, today, when we do collaborations, the individual parties have their own questions to ask. And there is no interference. Even though we come from private, that liberty is there. Probably our leaders have been open enough, unlike in any other private firm, that sometimes there is a kind of, this is the data which should not be in public domain. There can be multiple reasons. Investors might say you cannot put it in public. And another person who is contributing to the data might say, no, you can't put it in public. But for some reason, we have put up an MOU in place where this kind of problems do not arise. So I think that's helping. And even when our collaborators ask some important questions, they eventually involve us to see whether we as scientists sitting in industry can add value to their questions. And I think that's how, and even in the US, I think that works well because there is an openness in the collaboration, probably, in the Western countries.
I wanted to take a strong objection to Dr. Aju. I enjoy the panel very much, but I want to take strong objection when he said that medical oncologists in Kerala are not interested. It's not the question of being not interested. There are a lot of, what should I say, systematic problems that we face. The first and foremost is that our salary is decided based on the volume of patients that we see. No private institute is going to give me protected time to do research. I have to see patients 6 days a week, morning to evening. Where do I do research? No private institute is going to give me the supporting infrastructure to do research. If I'm going to write a trial, I have to start from the very beginning, from the regulatory framework to writing the trial to get for the budgeting. Everything has to be done personally. The department or the team will not be hired by the institute because they are not revenue making people. So these kind of departments can only exist in large governmental or university hospitals. It will never happen in the private sector. So we cannot just see all these and just say that medical oncologists in Kerala are not interested to do research.
So it's a priority of the
Just
organization.
to clarify, I didn't say that they're not interested.
I was
There's
just trying
no
to say-
incentive. So same thing, there's no incentive.
The second thing I want to say is that, okay, let us, in spite of all this, we want to do research. We, at MVR, we had a MOU with the Kottakkal Ayurvedishala, and we said that we are going to do a research with them. So immediately the first question came is, how can you do research with Ayurvedic products? You are allopathy doctors, you cannot do research with Ayurvedic products. So when we fashioned the trial in such a way, the Ayurveda doctors in Kottakkal will see the patients. In Kottakkal, they'll treat the patients, they'll do the follow-up. The only thing that we at MVR is going to do is, we are going to confirm the pathology for them. We'll bring the slides to us, we'll do the pathology, we'll make sure it is adenocarcinoma, we'll make sure it is EGFR mutated, we'll do the response evaluation. We'll do the CT scans and we'll say whether this patient is progressing or whether this patient is having stable disease. We'll confirm the diagnosis, we'll do the response evaluation. The actual treatment follow-up is done by the Ayurveda doctors in Kottakkal. Our ethics committee refused to take up this trial. They said, no, you cannot, your doctors, you cannot do research or you cannot be part of research because they are scared. They are scared what will happen if tomorrow controversy comes. They don't want to be part of that. So our ethics committee did not give clearance.
Thank you, sir. So Chandramohan, he's from the RCC setting.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I was standing to here with disagree with some of the panelists. Now, while I was standing, I'm going to disagree with Sridharan also. So why? Because I think when you look at research, the outcome of research should be the improvement of care or contribution to society. Let us take the Harvard example. Harvard is given $1 billion used mainly by federal funding, and they are supposed to give back to society some innovations. And here they're going to give, I think they're giving back some 500 new innovations and 1.6 billion business opportunities. So the money is justified. And why that is not happening in India? Why Shaji Kumar is doing publications in US, not our medical oncologists? Our doctors, and not only medical oncologists, even surgeons, visiting at busy institutes. I was just talking to John Manikar here. He's saying that in a cardiologist in Trivandrum Medical College, he's seeing 700 patients a day. How can he do research? At the same time, private person will be saying, I am seeing only few patients in a day, and I can do research. So it's contradictory. The reason is we are never trained in research. Rather than reading and by hearting Cunningham, DeVita, we are never bothered about such questions. So it's never in our curriculum. if you have will, I think these issues Sridharan raised are minuscule issues.
These two people are from India.
Minuscule
Kerala.
issues, yeah.
Okay.
They are producing large volume and sponsor issues. I think the issue is we have to be really taught about research, and now the good news is that India is changing. Now we have thanks to you, we have a startup thing in Cochin and Yenappa University. There is another startup vision. They are not only promoting research ideas, accruing funds, making products happen, collaborating with industries and coming with the products. And it's happening. In GCR it's happening. In Cochin it's happening. In Yenappa it's happening. And it's a change. At the same time, you look at US, they are cutting funds. Things are going to be reversed very soon. But I think as a community, we should encourage results. I think AMPOC and CASU should concentrate on going to places and make people do publications. Thanks to Aju, publications coming from Cochin also now, reaching good journals. And we should tap on this potential and come forward rather than criticizing ourselves.
Thank you. Next, yeah. Please, sir.
Okay. Uniting minds. I think that is what is meant for by this conclave. Or we have to change our mindset, you know. See, my point is that I've worked with the academics, I've worked with the industry, I've been with the funding agencies, Kerala State Council for Science. So all this put me to place few points in front of you. Dr. Chandrabas and Dr. Moni had specifically said about the basic and the funding opportunities that is available. As we know that all the universities or academic institutions, they do basic research. The main reason being that most of those research being done in the academic institutions are PhD programs. The students' aim is to do a good work and then go for publishing, because if the publication is high impact publication, I'm sure that you will have placement, H-index and all those kinds of calculations are there by which you say that you're a good researcher. Now once you complete your PhD, you do a good work because they involve themselves because they want to have a good research being done. But what happens to that research? The valley of death, which Dr. Chandrabas said. That's one place where all these research findings of the research students are dumped. The reason being that there is no furthering up. There is no funding available. Student gets a fellowship and he does the PhD work, gets a PhD, get good publications, and then...
So the next panelists are lining up there, so we'll just have to
that's okay, sir. I
yeah.
need to, because I've been listening to people for the past 2 days, you know, so I think I should say this. The main reason being that you have postdoctoral positions available. Most of the funding agencies, for example, National PDF, they say that you cannot work with the same mentor, you know, same institution. You should choose another place. That means the student will have to refine. As an academician, I'm saying this. Has to refine and do an entirely new work when he goes for a postdoc. So means that his work, which was very good, outstanding, because I see most of the differences that is happening, it's not being measured that way to put it into translational research. As is rightly said, there is no funding for translational research. There is no funding even for interdisciplinary research, you know, like what we are telling. There is no, when you do a research work, you cannot take it to the clinical side unless you have clinicians on board. So none of the, I've seen many people running around after the physicians, clinicians, to join a research group. Probably they are scared in the sense that most times they have to part with the clinical samples. They're scared of it. Clinical samples are not available. The clinicians are not on board. So how do you take that into a translational research, bench to bedside? Because a product or a process should go to the society. In Kerala State Council for Science and Technology, one of the best science and technologies in the country, we have now recently introduced a program called as Research Funding, Basic, Interdisciplinary and Translational. Now I'm sure that once this fund goes into the students who have done this extraordinary work, it would happen. So maybe that it is necessary the clinicians, maybe that they are in their comfort zones, you know, so they don't want to take any kind of problems like what many people have discussed. But if they can, involved in some research, because they can go deep into the biochemistry, physiology, and all the other details of a
Thank you,
cell's
sir.
function.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
No, sir,
Yeah.
I've just one more, sir, please.
No, I think Dr. Warrior, we want to
I-
listen to
I
Dr.
know.
Warrior too, sir. I
Let
think,
me
yeah.
one,
Yeah.
sir.
I know, I can see that's a
see,
very, very
we
hot
have,
topic and
we have spent a lot of time, you know.
excitement
See,
from
I have
the crowd, yes.
one major point, maybe that this we should discuss. The other thing is that I am in the Research Advisory Committee of Malabar Cancer Center and Regional Cancer Center. I had proposed once, because access to clinical samples. Now, all these institutions discard a lot of, surgical discards, which it is mandatory that at least for 5 years they should store it, because on a prior informed consent. What happens to this? Now, if you can have a process called as biobanking, don't you think that you can generate a lot of clinical samples which can be given to the researchers to do the clinical process? That is not happening. I've told both the places that we should have that. Just a classical example is that, there is a private agency called as Sapient Biologicals in Hyderabad. This lady, Dr. Jugnu Jain, came some few years back to have a biobank to be established in Kerala. All these discards, see, like for example, surgical discards, especially from Regional Cancer Center or other places, many things come in. So can we make them into that? She wanted to have an establishment. She has done wonderfully well in Hyderabad in association with Apollo Hospitals. She wants to have. I took her to RCC, to KIMS, to many other places, but they are not involved in, want to involve in a private company. But then, at least then let there be a public company, public process by which we can have a biobanking here. I'm sure that access to samples, wonderful facility can be created, and probably that we will have the students, I'm sure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Dr.
sir.
Warrior, we have to listen to Dr. Warrior, your comments.
I'm just representing from the management side. Actually, when we started MVR, we were excited about doing research, and we have made all possible. Like we never put pressure on anybody to see that many cases, so that they will be relieved of that pressure, and they will be getting a lot of time to do research. But when we see and when we have provided more manpower, what we see is they all leave by 3 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock. They will never, you can't ask them or compel them to do research. And we, I'll tell you one example of trying to do a workshop on clinical research methodologies. The very few takers for that meeting, the workshop. So I had to apply pressure, and I said everybody should be present. So then I took about 20 odd people out of 80 didn't attend the workshop, and I called personally and I asked them why you didn't come. They said, Sunday I cannot come to the hospital. That was the answer I got. And then about the funding, and also I just want to ask Aju, what do you mean by incentive? Is it the money they want or also about the Sabi. Sabi was telling that only 2 days he sits in OP and see. Suppose we do it, implement here, I'm sure the rest of the days they will never come to the hospital. This is my experience. This is not to generalize any it's a general statement, but there are few who are really interested. But I am totally confused how to take it from the management side. Thank you.
I can respond.
One more thing about the funding. I was just talking to Shaji today morning that funding, the government agencies are totally biased. They the private institutions, they see as they are all looters.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate but true. Regarding the incentives, one thought is give money to your medical oncology faculty or your researchers for every patient they recruit to a trial, or give them some protected time and ask for accountability. You know, incentives can be various ways. It could be credit in terms of manuscript, first authorship, credit to being sent for a conference free of cost to ASCO, anything like that.
I think we should have a separate conclave on research, sir, on this happy note. Sorry, sir, I think we just have to stop it otherwise. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Dr. Manu. Oh, yeah, please. Go ahead.
Sorry, sir. One practical challenge we faced is the shortage of manpower in the terms of supportive care, supportive staff. So we don't have trained the CRCs, CRAs, people to take us through the regulatory framework. So the courses are offered for this progress, but they are all dissociated from the major academic centers. So we should have trained persons who can work in the ground level. So that is a real problem whenever we started a research that we have faced.
Thank you. Thank you.